Well, welcome everyone to another Frontline Conversation with Leadership Greater Washington. We're thrilled to have Ann Kress with us, the president of Northern Virginia Community College. And Ann is one of the newest members of LGW. She was accepted yesterday into the LGW class of 2021. So welcome, Ann. Thank you very much for being part of the LGW family. We're very excited to have you here today. And we've been doing these conversations as a way to get information to our members on or from people who have been working on the front lines in terms of dealing with the coronavirus and having to radically change their way of doing business or their way of providing service to meet the needs of the new dynamic normal that we're calling. Everything's always changing nowadays. So Ann, thank you very much. How are you doing personally?
Oh, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I'm also very, very excited to be part of the new class of Leadership Greater Washington. It's a great opportunity for me. I will say, by way of saying how I'm doing, because I did just start on January 6th. So I did just start right before we moved away from our campuses. I've been telling people, I think I've been president of my kitchen counter for a little bit longer than I've been president of Nova at this point. But I'm doing very well. I think one of the things that's come through is how important our college is at this moment. And it's that mission that really drives all of us at Nova, and it keeps us working every single day. So I'm doing well personally and very excited professionally to be here.
And how about your family? Everybody doing well?
Yeah, so I'm in a divided family right now. So I think folks may or may not know that I came here from upstate New York, from Rochester, and I have two teenage kids. My daughter is a graduating senior. This has really been a completely blown senior year for her. So anyone who's part of this call who has a senior, I can completely sympathize and empathize with you. So she is going to go to the University of Maryland, College Park though, so we'll be close beginning in fall, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then our son is a junior in high school. So my husband and the kids stayed back in Rochester to complete the kids' schooling, and they've been in the same school district since they started and didn't want to take them out of that too soon. So they actually are here with us, though, with me for the next week and a half, which is great.
So, and you've been working from home since this whole crisis started.
Yes.
And your staff, where
yes.
are they located? What are they doing?
So we're all away from our campuses. I'm very excited, though, to say that at least the administrative staff around my table will be coming back to our offices on campus beginning next week. I'm delighted to move my operations from my apartment back to my office. I think one of the great challenges all of us are having right now is how do you balance your work and your life when all of them are taking place in the same, square footage? And so being able to go back to the office will actually be wonderful.
So how many people are you bringing back to the office?
Right now, actually, so we have 6 campuses. I don't know if everyone knows, we have 6 campuses. We've kept a skeleton crew on our campuses. So folks to maintain the buildings, some individuals around public safety, grounds, things like that. But most everyone else has been teleworking or remote teaching since really, I think the whole group has been gone since about March 23rd. So we'll bring about 13, maybe 13 to 20 folks, administrators back this and middle of next week. And then what we're looking to do is to gradually move individuals who have really campus-based responsibilities back to the campuses as Virginia moves through the various phases. So by the time we get to later phase 2, phase 3, we'll be able to have more of our operations folks there. And we're still really thinking about fall, and we can sort of talk about, if you want to, our thinking process for that. But we're thinking about our fall operations and have made a commitment to the college community to let them know about June 8th what our fall will look like.
So what have you done to the offices to allow people to come back to work? Have you had to rearrange anything? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We have had teams that have been led by our administrative personnel. So our VP for Administrative Services has worked with our Office for Emergency Management, Public Safety, facilities, each one of the campus operators, or in some cases we have office buildings, the office building manager, to think through what is unique in each one of those locations. Everything from how do we direct folks through the hallway, knowing that we have very few people on our campuses, which are large places, so it's fairly easy to do right now. How do you rethink office assignments during a time of social distancing? Obviously using masks, having deep cleaning on a regular basis. And then anyone who comes back to campus actually has to go through a training around COVID prevention. So we want folks to come back fully informed and aware of what their personal responsibility is, as well as what the institution's going to do for them.
Does that include the students have to go through that training?
We're looking at that right now. If we bring students back to campus this fall, we likely will require that as part of their orientation before they can come back on campus. Again, you know, I think what you hear consistently from public health is that there is an institutional or organizational responsibility, but there's also a personal responsibility that, you know, I can't make you wash your hands. You know, I'm going to ask you to wear a mask, but if you take it off, you need to understand that that's endangering others. And so we really want folks to understand what actions they need to be taking in order for us to all remain safe.
So what was it like in the first couple of weeks with the transition from everybody on campus? You have, what, about 73,000 students who go to Northern Virginia Community College. How did you transition to a virtual environment to finish the semester?
Well, I think it's important to understand as a backdrop that NOVA has been doing some form of distance education for more than 40 years, right? So what folks who are on this call may not know is that if you were to attend a distance education and online course at 19 of Virginia's 23 community colleges, you would actually be taking a course from NOVA. You just wouldn't know it. It would be our faculty, it would be our course, it would be branded with that institution's name. So online learning is a real strong part of what we do anyway. Right now, even before the pandemic, we had more than 12,000 students in our online courses. So that was significant for us. So just in terms of process, we thought really carefully when we saw what was happening with COVID that we had students who were away for spring break, and it seemed very critical not to have them come back to campus, right? Because that would just exacerbate the challenges that we saw growing in the region. So we made a decision during spring break to flip to remote learning, communicated that to our students. We took 2 days out of our spring schedule and did some quick work with faculty. We had a lot of support behind the scenes to help them flip their classes. Most of the courses were delivered in an online format or using synchronous Zoom meetings, just like this. And then we did a lot internally. So we recruited internally a group of individuals that we called remote student support specialists. It was a role we immediately created to reach out to all of our students. We amplified the staff in our call center. We added staff around our single stop services for students who are financially insecure. So we really tried to think through what would be the services students would need right away. And then we just went remote. And we did, I would say I personally did bi-weekly meetings, Zoom meetings with every single one of our campuses, and then bi-weekly meetings with our students. So I would have Zooms with, in some cases, more than 700 students on them, giving us feedback. We also set up opportunities for them to send in emails to certain addresses to let us know what services they needed that we weren't providing, what information did they need that we weren't providing. We wanted to be as responsive as possible. And it looks like we did a pretty good job of that. When we looked at our performance spring 19 to spring 2020, we saw a fairly similar grade distribution with the exception of an additional number of withdrawals because there were some courses that honestly we couldn't deliver remotely, and so students were offered the option to withdraw from those courses, and then an increase in incompletes for the same reason. So for example, we have very strong medical education programs, everything from nursing to dental hygiene to lab technology, and in those cases we couldn't do the clinicals, and so the courses needed to stop.
So are you done with the academic year for this semester? Or is that
well, we're never done with the academic
year? I know that.
So we actually
Always
have
go.
a full We have a full summer session that's ongoing now.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
was interesting to us. We thought, looking at some of the national trends, that we would see a significant enrollment decline in the summer. We've actually seen an increase amongst our students, and we've seen an increase, interestingly, in students who are looking to graduate from high school this June, who have signed up for our second half of summer as well. So I think the affordability, the quality, the fact that we're nearby, even if students are remote, they feel connected to our institution, has really paid off. So spring is in the books, we're in the midst of summer, and we're prepping for fall.
And how did you do your degree ceremonies?
Well, we didn't. So what we did was we did some videos, and we're actually, what is it? Oh, beginning June 1st, we'll mail students their diplomas. And, you know, as long as everything goes according to plan, we will have our May commencement in October at the Eagle Bank Arena for those students who want to participate.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That'll be very nice. I hope that works. I hope we're
I hope so
able to get
too.
together in October. So.
Yes.
And are you seeing, you talked about an increase in registrations for the summer. One of the things we're hearing across sort of the higher ed board, sorry about that,
That's okay.
is students are saying, I'm not paying $40,000 to do online courses. So are you seeing more students register who are pulling out of their college and registering for you for the time being while everything's online?
Well, we suspect that's the case. We don't have direct information. So I'll be very honest, our enrollment fall to fall right now is slightly down from where we would have been last year, but and not at a level that that would cause us a huge amount of concern at this point, in part because of the great uncertainty. I think this is going to be a fall where students register no matter where they're going to college very, very late. You saw a number of the universities extend their traditional acceptance date from May 1st to June 1st. We're hearing that there are some, and I can tell you just from personal experience, given that I have intelligence from my high school senior daughter, that there are colleges that have either declined or waitlisted students that suddenly are saying, well, would you like to come to institution X, Y, or Z? My daughter in particular was offered admission and scholarship to 3 different colleges she did not apply to, which was surprising to her. It's
Wow.
very much
That's
the same. Yes.
Yeah.
So I've done, for the first time ever, we're really reaching out to high school parents for this very reason. So I've done now 3 high school parent Zooms that have had several hundred parents per Zoom. We're getting a lot of interest, and I think this is indicative of your question, of our transfer opportunities for students. So I do think, again, with all of the uncertainty that's going on, whether it's financial or concerns about health or anything, there's a real incentive to think closer to home. We have such great transfer partnerships. You know, our advanced partnership with Mason is nationally recognized. We ran the data on how NOVA students do upon transfer. And what we're seeing is that the graduation rates for our students into the most selective Virginia universities, right, William and Mary, UVA, for example, is over 90%. In terms of their graduation within 4 years. So they're very competitive with students who begin there. Our students, when they transfer to other institutions, either equal or better the graduation rates of native students who began there as freshmen. So again, when parents start asking questions like that, you realize they might be rethinking their plans.
So you talked about doing Zoom with some of the high schools. Have you changed any of the partnerships with the high schools to try to further help them and get them to think more about this? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone knows that this has been a very disrupted academic year for students in K-12, especially in Virginia, because there were some questions about whether or not education or instruction could continue for a period of time. And so that actually impacted our high school dual enrollment. We have about 12,000 students in high school dual enrollment across the region. Those are students who at no cost whatsoever are earning college credit and high school credit while they're still in high school. We have the Virginia's only accredited concurrent enrollment program, so that's a strong program for NOVA. But when we looked at the summer and we saw where families were financially and where students were academically with a lot of disruption in their year, we actually decided to launch a brand new program. The classes start on Monday. It's called Jump Start. And it's a program that offers students who are high school seniors, in other words, they're about to graduate, in our service area, up to 2 college level courses for free online. So we're covering the full tuition for those courses. So students are effectively getting an $1,100 scholarship. We'll have more than 3,400 students in that program this summer. And those are 5, they had a choice of 6 different courses. 5 of them were typical university transfer courses. They're part of what in Virginia is known as the Passport. So they're general education courses. And then working with Amazon Web Services, we're offering a cloud computing course as well. So the interest in it, I mean, if we had 7,000 seats in Jumpstart, honestly, we could have filled them all, but we only had limited resources. The program will cover about $4 million in scholarship that's coming from our federal stimulus dollars from the CARES Act. So we thought this would be a wonderful way to help our families, help our students, get them thinking about college. We don't want them to lose momentum. If they come to Nova, fantastic. If they go somewhere else, if they go to Mason, if they go to American, if they go to VCU, great. What we don't want is for them to go nowhere, because we know most data shows that students, there are very few students, I'm going to be honest, who take a true gap year. Most students who don't go to college direct from high school just don't go to college. So I don't want to romanticize it. And we know that momentum is really important.
Anecdotally, I'm hearing a lot more students and parents say, maybe this is a good time for a gap year.
Yeah.
But as you said, the worry is they won't come back from the gap year. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. You know, I think the gap year for certain families makes sense. You know, if you know somebody, you know, you can go work as an intern in Uncle Tom's business, or you can go work for Aunt Susie, or I have a family friend who runs this business, or you can, I mean, I guess in gap years you used to travel the world, which isn't going to happen anymore, right? But I think, you know, if you're entering into a service program, that would be great. But what we see, quite honestly, for most of the students who would come to Nova is if they don't go to high school directly or go to college directly from high school, the data shows that they are very unlikely to go to college whatsoever, which is concerning, not just because of enrollment reasons, but it's concerning because most of the jobs in today's economy require some post-secondary education, right? They don't require necessarily a 4-year degree, a master's degree, or a doctorate, but they require a certificate that's industry recognized. They require an associate's degree. They require something more than high school. So if students aren't engaged in that, it's a great concern.
So let me ask you to look into your crystal ball and take a big picture view of higher ed over the next 5 years. There are a lot of people saying that private higher ed institutions will drop by the wayside, that there will be half of them in 5 years from what we have today. What are your thoughts on all that, and how do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I do think demography is destiny to a certain degree, and in higher ed, you're not going to find anyone who argues that higher ed isn't overbuilt, right? It was built for a population of students coming directly from high school that really we don't see anymore, right? The number of younger people in our country is declining. The number of older people is increasing, folks who look more like me than like my children. And the demographics, when we see where younger populations are increasing, it's in populations of students who are much more likely to start at community colleges or at public 4-year institutions. So I do think what you're seeing in some of the particularly smaller, more rural private higher ed institutions is a challenge that long predated COVID, right? That the cost of them is difficult for families to absorb anymore. So, but I also, you know, I'm not one of those folks who thinks, well, the future, everyone's going to learn online, because we've had online education for a very long time. And you can see that the majority of students still want to be on site. Right? There's something about that connection. There's something about the life of a college, whether it's a community college or a 4-year institution. It's that social, emotional support. It's the leadership skills. It's really why you come to college. It's not just about academics. It's about everything that happens outside of the classroom as well. So I do think that's going to continue, but I think there'll be increasing questions about what price point folks are willing to pay to have that experience.
And your description of why people need to actually physically attend college is a great description of what we do at LGW. I mean, we are doing everything virtually now, but we need that personal connection. We need opening retreat, closing retreat. We need the people to come together to share their experiences and to bond and to work together to help the region. So it's very similar in what we're dealing with as well. So 73,000 students. How many of them come directly from high school? How many are older adults coming back?
The majority of our students are of a younger age. So our average student age across the institution is right around 21 to 23 years old, which suggests we have a strong population who fall into what we typically think of as traditional college students, right? 18 to 22. But that changes when you look by program. So when you look at most of our transfer programs, that's where you're going to see our traditional student age. When you look in most of our career and technical education programs, whether those are in healthcare, automotive, welding, IT is a huge array of programs for us, everything from cloud to cyber to data analytics. That's when you start to see increasing student age. So the student age in those programs is going to be probably closer to 26, 27. So you're seeing much older students in those programs. And again, I think it's one of the powers of a comprehensive community college like Nova is that we have something to offer anyone. If you're a high school honors student and you're looking to be a high achiever, we have an honors program. We have transfer relationships. We have independent research you can take on. If you're a single parent who's coming back looking for a career opportunity, we have those as well, whether it's in healthcare, IT, or the trades. So it is the benefit that I think Nova offers everyone in this region right in their own backyard is that if you have a dream of what you want your future to look like, you're going to be able to find it at Nova.
And you, I'm sure you, or I know you have sort of growth plans or strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. How has that changed with COVID? Have you had to go back and rethink a lot of things? What's your vision for Nova 5 years from now?
Well, I don't think much about our plan in at the higher level has changed, right? Nova has committed that every student succeeds, every program achieves, every community prospers, right? That's what drives us every single day. And when we look at what we're doing, I think it's not a change in what those goals are, it's a change in how we deliver, right? So when we're talking about student success and suddenly we have to flip to go remote, what we did was we found a core of folks, we called them remote student support specialists so that our students could continue along that success continuum because we knew some of them were very fluent in what we're doing today, but some of them were not. We also knew that some of our students didn't have access to broadband or Wi-Fi. So we turned our parking lots into Wi-Fi stations. We knew that some of our students needed laptops. So we loaned those out to our students. So I think it's not so much a change in our strategic plan, but it's how we get there. That path has changed slightly. And the last thing I'll mention is that Nova placed a real premium in our strategic plan, our last strategic plan, which runs from 2017 to 2023, on making sure that Nova was that engine that would help our community prosper and really leaned into our workforce development efforts. And so we've talked a lot about how that road to recovery runs through Nova at this point, whether it's a short-term certificate or an applied associate's degree. We really want to help in the rebuilding of personal family finances for our students, but also of the region.
So you have 6 campuses. Do you see that number growing, shrinking over 5-10 years?
No, I think we probably won't grow it, nor will we shrink it. I think we're, I will say as a short-term Northern Virginia resident, one of the initial signs that something was very different was when you looked at the morning traffic and everything was green, right? And you're like, wait, where did I move again? So one of the challenges we know for our students is getting from place to place. So it's one of the reasons why those campuses are incredibly important. And so students will identify with their campuses. I live in Loudoun. I don't want to drive to Alexandria. I take courses at the Loudoun campus. I take them at Manassas. So I think it's the right number of locations. I also think, going back to your point earlier, location is incredibly important because it's a structure, it's grounding. What we heard from a lot of our students was they were so happy to be able to continue their instruction online, right, and engage in that academic continuity, but they missed their campus. They missed their faculty members. It was interesting. We had 3 students who, there's a very prestigious scholarship, the Jack Kent Cooke Scholarship, that's offered to community college students. So this is a scholarship for high-performing community college students. It scholarships them to receive up to $40,000 a year for 3 years to complete their bachelor's degrees at highly selective institutions. So NOVA had 3 Jack Kent Cooke scholars out of 50 across the country. All 3 Virginia scholars came from NOVA, right? Again, a nice marker of the quality of our institution, our faculty, and our students. But in talking with those students, every one of them, high-performing students, talked about how they would not have realized what they could do if they hadn't run into Professor X or faculty member Y, or this advisor, or that organization, or, you know, students need someone to believe in them. And as much as we can do this way, there is nothing that beats sitting across from somebody and having that conversation where somebody says, I believe in you. I believe you can do more. I believe in your talents and your potential. And I think that's really the business that we're in. And it's one of the things that happens on our campuses.
So that was a great good news story. Are there other good news stories you have through the last 2 months of people sort of stepping up, doing things you didn't expect or extremely proud of?
Well, absolutely. I will just say, you know, let's just start at the beginning. I've worked in higher education my whole career. And if you had told me that we could take 73,000 students, you know, close to 1,000 different faculty members and say on a Thursday, hey, next week, Wednesday, we're all going to go remote and everyone's going to stick to it and we're going to put our best efforts, let's go, I would have laughed at you. I would have said that's never going to happen. But we did it. And I think, again, it speaks to the belief that our faculty and our staff have in the role that they play in the lives of our students, that they could see that our students were really needed them and needed them to step up. So that to me is just extraordinary. The effort, the above and beyond the folks engaged in to keep students connected is just so powerful. And then, you know, when we saw and heard from a number of our students, you know, 2/3 of NOVA students are part-time, and that's a huge number. And most of them worked in sectors of the economy in our region that immediately started laying people off: hospitality, retail, personal services. And so when our foundation heard that, they immediately set about raising money to provide students in need with $500 grants. That was by March 23rd. Right? We had that up and running. So again, the notes that we got from students about how impactful those $500 were to them, that it helped them stay in school. I had a student write me that she was able to use some of those dollars to continue her chemo treatment. Because she wanted to continue her studies at NOVA. She's an international student and can't make use of a lot of the health programs that we would otherwise offer in this country. And so having that money was incredibly important. I had another student write me that that enabled her to pay her internet bill so that she could stay online. All of this tells us that our students live on the margins, many of them, and that NOVA is a lifeline for them.
So you mentioned the foundation, and are you worried about state and local budget cuts? How will that impact you? I know it's something that everybody around the country is sort of scrambling with, how to deal with loss of revenue to our local and state governments.
Yes, absolutely. No, we are worried. I will say, and I should knock on, I don't have any wood behind me. This is a fake backdrop, otherwise I'd knock on it. But
knock on my head for that.
So we have fared fairly well in local budgets thus far. And I think it's because, again, we're an investment, right? Folks see that investing in NOVA means investing in the future of our communities. At the state level, I think it's fair to say all bets are off. Again, I've been working in higher ed my whole career. Higher education is a very easy part of a state budget to cut for lots of different reasons. So we're anticipating significant budget cuts. We're modeling, 10, 15, 20% in our state allocations That will be painful. It will have repercussions on what we can do. We were very grateful for the initial investment from the federal government, both the dollars for emergency aid grants, additional emergency aid grants to our students, and also some institutional funds. But we're really looking to the future to see what else can happen in stimulus dollars, not so much for us as an institution, honestly, but to help our students, because we do know that the students who are going to be coming to us will have increasing personal needs, non-academic needs that right now we're not staffed up to address or funded to address. So having some of those dollars to better support our students will be critical.
So were you all part of the national discussion about treating community college as an education right and making it free for students everywhere? That's part of the presidential campaign. It's been part of the national debate for some time.
Yes.
It sounds like that's not going to happen because of this for a while. But were you part of that, or what do you feel about that?
Yeah, and we were. But what I always, and I think it's great. And I came from New York. New York had the Excelsior program that Governor Cuomo launched, and I was part of that as well. But I always try to remind people that for most students, tuition is the least cost they will bear for higher education. So tuition is also the easiest cost to cover, right? For most of our students at Nova who get aid, on average will receive in their Pell Grant and other non-loan aid about $7,300. Our tuition and fees all in are $5,600 for a full-time student for a full year. I want to repeat that, because most institutions you'd expect to hear another zero on that. It's $5,600 for a full-time student for a full year, tuition, fees, all in. But we know that that is out of reach for many of our students. So, but it's what costs is beyond that, right? All of those opportunity costs that students bear to come to college. Many of our students are parents. So childcare is suddenly a cost they have to bear. They aren't able to work as much as they might have. They need to pay for transportation. They need to pay for housing. So the total cost of education is something that is typically overlooked when we talk about these free college plans, because they focus on tuition only. But tuition itself is typically a third of what the total cost of education is.
How or what kinds of leadership lessons have you learned in the last couple months? Has anything struck you as, gee, this is something that I need to pay attention to, or something that I've learned watching people respond to this?
I think a few things. One is, it's the oldest leadership lesson in the book, right? Communicate, communicate, communicate. Especially when you're at a distance, right? Because there's so much that can fill up this vacuum that's here. So I think, again, this has really reinforced how important it is as a leader at any level to communicate frequently and regularly and transparently and honestly with the folks that you're leading. So we went into this, I kept telling folks, we're going in eyes wide open. We're all going to share in this. I'm going to tell you the information that I know. We're going to share things with you. And so we're going to ask questions. And so we did, in my campus Zooms, we did this format as well, right? The chat box was open. People could ask any question. If they didn't feel comfortable asking it in that open forum, there was an email address for them to send it into. So I think communication and just the incredible importance of that when you're not in physical proximity to folks is incredibly important. There's just something about being in the same place, even if you're not having a conversation, that is reassuring in a way that being separated is not. So I think that's one. The other is how much I think we undersell the emotional and social aspect of the work that we do. And we know that for many of our employees, working remotely was incredibly difficult. That's not who they are as people. Right? They took their jobs because they interacted with others. They did not sign up for this work to be in their apartments or their homes or somewhere else, teaching a class, working with students. So again, I think understanding the interconnection between who people are, that authentic self that calls them to do the work that they do, and how right now the work that we're doing is just not mapping for some of our folks. And again, when we talk about getting back to our locations, even in a socially distanced way, and I think we see all sorts of stories about how it's crazy for higher ed to think about this or to think about that, or businesses to call people back to work. I think when you start to talk to people who are doing remote working, and they're going to be really honest with you, it is hard. It is much harder than doing the same work in a physical location for all sorts of reasons. And so I think that's a lesson that we've learned.
So you mentioned earlier you have 1,000 faculty members. How many other staff do you have at Nova?
So we all across our institutions, we've got a little bit more than 3,000 employees. Most of our investment, as you would expect, is with student-facing folks. So whether those are faculty or counselors or advisors or librarians. So that's really where our huge investment is as an academic institution. And again, we are all about students, all about teaching, right? We don't have a research function. We're not a university. Folks come to work at Nova because they want to work with students. And that's what drives all of our employees, even if they're working in the controller's office. They know that the work that they're doing supports individuals who are supporting our students.
So at LGW, we have 6 employees, and it was fairly easy for us to go work from home.
Yeah.
How many of those 3,000 employees are working from home now? Just, I want people to get a sense of the magnitude of what you had to do in a week's time.
Oh yeah, I would say all but maybe 10% are working. And I'll also say that as a leadership team, we made a commitment. We knew that we had individuals whose work was entirely campus-based, right? If you're on the grounds crew, there's not a lot for you to do teleworking. But we also knew that as an institution, we had an obligation to the folks who made a commitment to us, that we had a commitment to them. And so we became very creative in our teleworking. So we had folks do their training and we paid them for that. We had folks make phone calls to our students and we paid them for that time. So what we really had a commitment, and I was very public with this with our campuses, that we committed to them. We didn't want anyone to worry about their employment status during COVID. We would look at the next year's budget when that bell rang, but through this period of time, we would keep people in a paid status, and we were able to do that. Now that we're able to bring people back to campuses, we'll start to do that, especially those folks who are purely campus-based. But that was really important to us as an organization.
Well, that's great news. That's got to be very comforting.
Yes, and it was very comforting to the folks because, I'm sure folks on this call, somebody who's been laid off. I know somebody who's been laid off or furloughed, and then that starts to build a sense of anxiety. And what about me? What's next for me? And on top of everything else that was going on, that was the last thing we wanted people to worry about.
So if I could ask you to sort of take us through your decision-making process for the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I know you said you were going to announce plans by June 8th, but how are you making those decisions, and what do you think the fall is going to look like, and what do you think the enrollment's going to look like this fall?
Sure. So the decision-making process, as always, we're guided by the folks who know the most about public health. And we've had this discussion at Nova, and I've had it on Zooms, that I know you have a cousin who knows somebody who sent you an email about what really happened with COVID. I get it. My mom sends me stuff. I know that. But what we look to is the Centers for Disease Control. We look to Virginia Department of Health. We look to the governor's plan. That's where we look to local public health. That's where we're getting our guidance from, right? Not somebody's blog that once read an article about epidemiology. So, we want people to understand what's guiding our decision making. We also work very closely with, as I mentioned, we've got a team that has been, that's being run by our Office of Emergency Management that's looking at all of this guidance. There isn't a shortage of material, right? There's guidance that the College Health Association put out around what a return for academic institutions should look like. There's guidance from the CDC. The governor's education committee is going to release something probably next week. So there's lots of guidance out there. So that's the first and foremost, is that the health and well-being of our college community is primary. Then we step back and we ask ourselves, but we also have a responsibility to our students. And we know that we have a number of programs that we're not able to continue at all during our suspension of campus activities. Our health programs, for example, stopped in their tracks. We've got some trades programs, CTE programs, some IT programs where the level of computing power and networking just isn't available to students at home. So we want to think about how we can bring those students back to campus, even if nothing else, because we have an obligation to help them continue in their career pathways. What we do know for fall is that it's not going to be back to normal, right? We're not going to open our doors and say, come on in, everybody. But we do know, for example, again, that we have students who need our computer labs, which are shut right now. So we want to be able to offer them the opportunity, using appropriate social distancing and cleaning, to use our computers if they don't have them in their homes. We know there are students who need to see counselors, who need to see advisors. So what we're really thinking about is almost a triage approach, that here is the greatest need for our students. Let's prioritize everything that's in that tier and bringing it back to campus as we can safely. And then let's open up a second tier. And in that second tier would be students who have been very forthcoming that they're just not really good in a remote environment. This is not the way that they believe that they learn the best. They're trying really hard, but they think they would do better in a classroom. And then we have to think about strategies like hybrid instruction that would enable them to come back to campus in small groups, get that interaction that they value, again, socially distanced, but put them in an environment where they are likely to be more successful. But I think, you know, if I were to put something in writing today, I would say that a significant portion of our curriculum is still going to be delivered remotely when it comes to fall.
How long do you think that will continue, through the next academic year, or?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that's the challenge that we're all struggling with, because we know that there isn't going to be some big X on the calendar when we're done dealing with COVID, right? And so I do think part of this is rethinking a lot of what we do for a world in which these disruptions are much more likely to occur. So, you know, on the converse side, we know there are services that we have typically made students come to campus for that they don't want to come to campus for anymore. We also know that there are students now who are expecting that we can be 24/7, because if they're sending an email to somebody at night, it's being returned. We've really rolled out more expansive 24-hour services through some contracts that we have, and students are using them. So we do know that even post-COVID, we need to think much more clearly about the needs of our students and how we can serve them remotely by being more 24/7 with some of our services. Even if students want their classes on campus, they don't necessarily want to come in for a lot of the things we've made them come in before.
So one of the questions we got in the chat box really is, I think it's bigger than just COVID, but it's sort of a familiar question. What are you doing with STEM for women? How do you promote women in STEM?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So a few things. Nova has an arm of the college, which right now has gone virtual, which is called Nova Systemic, and it's STEM in the middle. And it is really, and so I'm going to sort of back this up from college. It really starts to engage young people far earlier. So this is a part of the college that brings in field trips. We have a fabrication lab, a fab lab, that we opened shortly before we flipped to remote in COVID. What it does is it makes a lot of STEM, which might seem a little bit more esoteric, especially to young women, real. So it shows them how to program and to make digital wearables, how to do high-end sort of fabrications. So it talks about high-tech materials. So trying to interest students in STEM across the board, and we have a whole, 3D printing, molding, all of that, so that students begin to see the relevance of this. We are also strongly engaged in FIRST robotics. But part of this is, and I'll just give you an example that our systemic staff shared with me. So they do these, they do field trips for all sorts of ages of students. And what they themselves can track is the difference between middle school and high school. So in middle school, they see many more young women. By the time these classes hit high school, they see far fewer. And so we know that we need to back this up, because if we're going to rely on the pipeline that's coming through from high school with young women who are interested in STEM, it's going to be a challenge to fill that pipeline, because they're gone by the time high school hits, is what we're seeing. So we're engaging more and more early on, trying to get students to understand that STEM isn't a one size fits all, that there is a pathway for everyone, that there are implications and applications of STEM across the discipline, right? We're really strong believers in that STEAM approach, right? It's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, where that creative thinking is really coming sometimes from the place that most traditional STEM might not have had. So it's a long way of saying is that if we know that if we rely only on the students who are coming to us with an interest in STEM as high school students, we're never going to hit that. The other thing I will say on the other side is that, especially in applied programs, we see strong female participation. So I know that the numbers in computer science, for example, at the master's and the doctorate and even the bachelor's level is abysmal for females, but we see strong female participation in our direct to work CTE programs that are focused on IT. So that's important to us, that we really want to encourage young women in particular to think of cloud computing and cybersecurity and all of these fields as opportunities for them.
And I want to thank you very much for this conversation. I'd like to just make a couple of quick comments while Chase puts up the screen of
Sure.
ways that we can help you or get resources from you to deal with all this. Certainly any aid to help the grants to Nova students will be enormously appreciated. I love your idea of this orientation for the faculty members, the staff, and the students. I think that's something everybody should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Any business that's looking at people coming back to the office needs to do that. And then the second thing I want to mention, you mentioned very briefly that you like the fact that all the roads are green now, that you can get where you want. We had Mayor Bowser on one of these conversations recently, and as tragic as everything is, as horrible as it is, and we're dealing with it every day, she said one of the things she likes is that she can get anywhere she wants to in the district in 15 minutes.
Yes.
She was hoping somehow that could continue. I'm not sure how that would happen. But anyway, so Ann, let me just leave it to you for the final word. Thank you again for all this. It was great seeing you. I'm very excited about you being part of our class of 2021.
Oh, well, I'm delighted. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to meet all of my new classmates. But, you know, the one thing I would just leave folks with is we've been talking a lot at Nova about how certainly the pandemic has affected everyone, but it hasn't affected everyone equally. And those notions of equity and the importance of always putting that first in so many of our conversations, I think as the pandemic has shown a light on a lot of the inequities that long predated COVID, but we all need to work as leaders together to try to address. So I'm excited to work with others who are interested in that.
And thank you very much. We'll close on those great words and have a great day, and we'll hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.